Hello, this is the 45th lecture of the Semantic SEO course. In this lecture, we will look at another content brief, and we will try to understand how we continue to structure the macro and the micro context for the macro and the micro semantics. And in the last lecture, we have talked about the format selection for increasing the overall relevance, especially for the passage ranking algorithms. In this lecture, when we look at this specific content brief, you will realize that, again, we actually have 3 columns in this area. And the macro context that we have chosen here is actually drinking too much water and its effects, or its health effects this time. If you look at these two things, they seem like similar. Again, we have the drink, and again, we have the water, and here we have the drinking water. The thing is that when we think about the drinking water, there are 2 possible interpretations for that. One is predicate, drinking water. Another one is the drinking water, which means a type of the water. So to be able to be relevant to the specific context or contexts, we will need to process these predicate and this specific qualifier in every way, and we will need to replace, or we want to use these things as substitute contexts to each other. In the previous content brief, we actually processed this specific term or the specific concept, drinking water, as a process and also as a type of water. We defined the specific benefits in this process and also in this type of water at the same time. That's why from time to time also we have focused on the time of the drinking water, or also amount of the drinking water, or at the same time the drinking water's, let's say, the cost to connect everything to the Svalbard as much as possible. Then we actually focused on the dehydration, which is nearly the opposite of the drinking water. And when we go to this part again, this is actually opposite of this. So right now we are actually, in a way, we are actually focusing on this specific area as much as possible. And here we have more symptoms than just a 9. From time to time, when we continue to create these specific content items or the content item briefs, sometimes while creating this specific brief, we can go further to the specific numbers or go further from the previously planned content item. And if it is happening, you will need to always go back and you will need to update the specific anchor text. In this situation, since we have published everything suddenly, it wasn't a problem because we had enough time to be able to fix all these anchor tags or change their places and etc. And when we look at these specific 3 columns, one more time we see helpline, which is the place that actually we are trying to be classified together. And again, we see another government website. So during the COVID process or the situation and the pandemic, especially the government websites, they actually started to rank higher. We called this situation as the search engine promotion. And any website that gets closeness or association with the government sources in terms of a citation, mention, or being linked to, it was a clear signal for the authority and the authoritativeness. And the misinformation during the COVID, it was so severe, especially many news websites, they just lost really good amount of rankings. And I have also published these things in the past. You can check, for instance, my SlideShare account to see how the news sources ranked further or just lost their rankings just because they were against the vaccinations and other types of things. So basically, if you look at our query columns, the one of them is just for the term water intoxication, and this one is for being classified, and this one is for outranking for that specific term. Which means that one more time, we will need to create a contextual vector together by looking at these 3 columns. When we look at here, when we search for actually drinking too much water, it brings us the water intoxication. That's why in our macro context, first we use this specific question because it appears directly inside the queries. Then to the end, we actually define this situation, drinking too much water. In this case, we can tell that these specific macro context terms, this is a slight variation and the modified version of our previous macro context. It is connected in terms of a different health condition. In this one, we have focused on the benefits. Here, we are actually focusing on the risks. So in terms of the effect or the context signifier, we have an antonym situation. And when we look at the the specific term in this area, we will need to talk about and use the specific attribute symptoms. That's why here we directly have this query. And if you go further to the below parts, we will see that actually that one more time and the baby or the babies. The same thing will be appearing in these parts too. The thing is that only this specific question, one more time, it is appearing. How much water to drink per day and how much water is too much water, basically. Then we have some other types of conditions and the definitions and etc. So, in the next lecture, we will directly look at our contextual vector, and especially the contextual bridge will be important because as you see here, again we have an incrementally ordered heading list. And this list doesn't start from this area. In the previous example, it was starting directly here, and there was a number in this part. But here we have a question, then a definitional part, then we actually start to give the symptoms as a heading list. And then we have a bridge, and from there we actually go to the supplementary content and the microsemantics. So, see you in the next lecture.